You know you shouldn't. That's the part nobody talks about. In the moment the purchase happens, some part of you already knows. The account balance, the bill coming at the end of the month, the version of you that will have to deal with this later, and you buy it anyway. And afterward there's a specific feeling. Not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction. Something in between that doesn't fully resolve. And you tell yourself it won't happen again. Until it does, and you've explained it the same way most people do, that you're bad with money, that you lack discipline, that you just need a better budget or a stricter system or more willpower next time. But willpower isn't what's failing here. Here's what's actually happening. Spending money doesn't feel like spending money in the moment it happens. It feels like relief. The neuroscience behind purchasing behavior shows that buying something activates the same dopamine pathways as any other reward behavior. But it does something more specific than a generic dopamine hit. It interrupts whatever was present before the purchase, the stress, the boredom, the low-level anxiety, the uncomfortable feeling that something is missing, gets displaced, temporarily, completely, by the focused, forward-moving act of acquiring something. Psychologists call this emotional purchasing, using spending behavior not to obtain objects, but to regulate internal emotional states. And research consistently shows it's the primary driver behind most impulsive financial decisions. You weren't buying the thing, you were buying the interruption. But here's where it gets more uncomfortable. Because emotional purchasing doesn't operate randomly, it targets specific emotional states with specific spending patterns. Anxiety gets interrupted by control purchases, things that create order, systems, organizers, equipment for a project you haven't started yet. The spending produces a feeling of agency in a situation that felt unmanageable. Emptiness gets interrupted by experience purchases, restaurants, events, trips planned in moments of flatness. The spending produces a feeling of aliveness that the ordinary day wasn't providing. Shame gets interrupted by status purchases, clothes, brands, objects that signal a version of yourself you need others to see. The spending produces a temporary elevation above the feeling that you're not quite enough as you currently are. And here's the mechanism that makes it so hard to stop. The interruption works, not permanently, not even for long. But in the moment the purchase happens, the emotional state that triggered it genuinely recedes. The anxiety quiets. The emptiness lifts briefly. The shame gets covered. And the brain files that outcome as a solution. Which means next time the same emotional state arrives, and it always arrives, the same solution gets retrieved. Psychologists call this negative reinforcement loop, where a behavior is sustained not because it produces something good, but because it reliably removes something bad. It's the same mechanism that sustains every compulsive behavior, and it's almost impossible to interrupt with willpower alone, because willpower addresses the decision. The emotional state addresses the need, and until the need gets addressed, the decision keeps getting made. But there's a second layer underneath the emotional regulation mechanism that most people never examine: time. Behavioral economists have documented a phenomenon called temporal discounting, the brain's tendency to assign significantly more value to immediate reward than to future consequence. The further away a cost is, the less real it feels relative to what's available right now, which means the version of you making the purchase and the version of you paying the bill next month aren't experiencing the same reality. The spending self is present, emotional, responding to something real happening right now. The paying self is abstract, distant, easy to discount in the moment they're needed most. So when you buy something you can't afford, you're not being irrational. You're being precisely rational, according to a brain that weights immediate emotional relief far more heavily than future financial consequence. That's not a character flaw. That's neuroscience. But here's the part that doesn't let you off the hook. Knowing the mechanism doesn't neutralize it, because the emotional states driving the spending are still there. The anxiety, the emptiness, the shame, the low-level feeling that something is missing that a purchase might temporarily fix. And those states aren't going to be solved by a better budget. They're going to keep producing the same spending behavior until they get addressed directly. which means the question worth sitting with isn't how to spend less. It's what you're actually buying when you buy something you can't afford, not the object, the feeling the object was standing in for. Because until you know what that feeling is, the budget won't hold, the willpower won't last, and the version of you that has to deal with it later will keep being a stranger you borrow from, without ever intending to pay back. If a specific purchase came to mind while reading this, one that didn't quite make sense in the cold light of the bank statement, the feeling behind that purchase is worth more of your attention than the purchase itself.